Welcome to the StoryTellers Live YouTube channel. Here, we share real stories of the hope found in Jesus. The story you're about to hear was recorded live at a gathering hosted by one of our StoryTellers Live communities across the Southeast. Our prayer is that as you listen, your heart is encouraged and your faith is strengthened. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a story. Enjoy! Thanks, y'all. I'm Laurie Brooker. I grew up in Trussville. I'm born and raised here, actually right down the street. And I graduated from Hewitt in 1996, went to Auburn. And after I graduated, I came back here to start my adult life. Some of my first memories were at church. Some of my oldest friends I met through church. And I'm forever grateful that y'all started me out with that foundation. And it has just allowed me to develop a relationship with Jesus. It's just kind of always been there. I've always known, about God. And I pray that I've done the same thing with my kids as far as laying that foundation for them so that they can, when they're faced with things, they know who to turn to. Needless to say, my roots are deep here. And even though it's grown tremendously over time, there is something about this town, and y'all that live here know what I'm talking about. I would not want to be anywhere else going through what we went through. I'm an only child by birth, and my parents got divorced when I was 5, which is probably the first thing that I don't remember this, but it's probably the first event of my life that what didn't really go like you thought it would go. And it's also the first time that God showed me something incredible that could come out of something that you didn't really want to happen. My dad got remarried when I was 8, and I got a second mom. There's my mom and my second mom. And I got a brother and an entire bonus family that has loved me like their own since day one. And I'll come back to that later, but for now, that's just a no coincidences. So fast forward to sophomore year of high school. First day of sophomore year, I spotted this guy, and I came to find out his name was Brad Eccles. He was a senior. He played football. He was always doing something crazy to make people laugh. And it ended up, I ended up taking him to my cheer date party that December. That was like our first date. Did not know that that was a relationship that it would end up changing my life forever. So and by my junior year at Auburn, we were together. That was it. We got married August 16th, 2003. And back then I got so frustrated with the timing of everything because he would, like, y'all know, right? I was so ready to be married. I had graduated school. I had a house. I had a job. We'd been dating forever, and it was just like the natural thing. And I was just like, okay, like it's time. So we were married. We had our first child, Katie, December of 2004. A couple of years later, Jake came along, and life was great. We were rocking and rolling. We had a strong marriage. We had healthy kids. We had great friends, super close to our family. Brad was my person. He knew what I was thinking without me having to say a word. He could calm me down when I was wound up, which was quite often. He could always make me laugh, and everybody else. And if y'all know Brad, you know what I'm talking about. But also if you know Jake, my son, he is so much like Brad that if you didn't know Brad, you know Jake. I mean, that's how, like, knowing Jake is exactly, he's just like his dad. He was the best dad. He loved the kids. He was very involved with them. And I mean, he was always doing stuff with them. They were his world. And we knew no matter what happened in life, we would get through it together. So September 2012, out of the blue, Brad's like, I do not feel good. Like, I've got some pain he had pain in his side or something. And he kind of blew it off. And then the next day he came home from the golf course early. And I knew that was going to be trouble because he did not ever do that. He was in so much pain, and he thought he had appendicitis. So he didn't want to make a big deal about it, but he thought he needed to go to the ER. But he called the emergency room first to, like, make sure that there wasn't, like, a long wait. I mean, he was like, I don't want to go wait forever. I'm just going to see how long the wait is. So he calls. It was not long, so he went ahead and took off, and he said, "Just stay here with the kids, we don't want to interrupt anything. I'll let you know what they say." So he calls me about 2 hours later, and the first thing he said was, "Don't freak out." Well, okay. So, of course, that's the first thing that I do is freak out, and he said, "They found a mass in my belly." And I was like, "What?" And starts talking, and, like, this sounds so dramatic, but, in the movies when your life flashes before your eyes, that's what happened. It was just like every big date that had ever happened in our life, like dates, anniversary, engagement, marriage, like all of these things are just flashing into my head. And I thought, they're going to say he's going to have like stomach cancer and they're going to give him like 6 months to live, which was like such a downer thing to even think immediately. But that's where I went. He got home and told me more of what the doctor said. And they didn't think that it was cancer, but they were going to go ahead and schedule him to meet with a surgeon because he just needed to get whatever this was out. So he had surgery a couple weeks later, 1st of October. And it took forever, the surgery did. And the doctor finally came out, the surgeon came out to say that, everything was over with and told us that day that they had taken a 4-pound mass out of his small intestines. Like 4 pounds. If you knew Brad, I don't even know how that happened. I don't even know how that was in his body, but much more complicated than they ever thought that it was going to be. So it was called a Meckel's diverticulum, which is a congenital defect, basically, where when they cut the umbilical cord, it doesn't retract all the way. And it kind of created this pouch or pocket like an appendix, kind of like an appendix. Very rare to even happen. But that's what they said that it was. At that same day, the doctor said, "There's no way this is cancer." I mean, I've seen everything. There's no way this is cancer. But we're going to send it off anyway just to test everything. Which are haunting words, and takes lots and lots of prayers to not have to go back through that. And just what if that whole situation, because there's no point. But he was in the hospital for 5 days recovering, and then they sent us home, and the whole time, he's recovering, I'm studying Meckel's diverticulum and Googling everything that I can about it. And we're just waiting on these path results. And we waited and we waited and waited. I mean, it took forever. We never heard anything. And somewhere along the way, somebody said, one of the doctors was like, it's some type of cancer, but we don't know what. Okay. So, and we don't know what to do. So we just have to wait. So December 21st, like 2.5 months after his surgery, we finally got the official diagnosis. It was a rare, aggressive cancer of the small intestine. So inside this mass, there was like a little tumor, and that was the cancer. That same day, they had run a scan to just make sure that it hadn't spread anywhere. And that day in the doctor's office, we found out not only about this cancer, but it had spread to his liver, like 13 spots. I mean, like big spread. That was completely like the first gut punch of many that we got in that doctor's office. I didn't know what to think. I was just totally stunned. And Brad's first questions was, "What is it hereditary?" Like all he could think of was the kids. It was just so surreal. I mean, we weren't expecting any of it, but we certainly weren't expecting it to be stage 4 cancer. And so we left. I mean, your whole world's just been turned upside down. And for whatever reason that day, we drove separately. Like there's this weird pattern of just odd things. Like he went to the hospital by himself. We drive separately to this doctor's appointment. But I remember getting into the car and I called Mom. And well, before I called you, I sat and I just sobbed. And I'm bawling and pleading with God to save my husband and just, let him be healed. And don't let this be as bad as they say it is. And I called you, and I don't even know what I said. I'm surprised that you could even understand me because I know I was hysterical. But my mom, she just started praying. And she prayed for Brad, And she prayed for me and the kids and our family and for peace with what was about to happen. So thank you. Because from the very beginning, we've just gone straight to God with it. December 26th, he began chemo. And again, we have no idea what we're doing. Brad was 30, I was 34. Our kids were 8 and 5. So we had never been around really anybody that had cancer. We didn't even really know what it was, honestly. And we had no idea what to expect. We were totally in reaction mode every day. I mean, you never could get a grasp on the whole situation. It was just like, what's coming at us today? So he would go on like a 3-week routine. He would have chemo. He'd go home and let his numbers come back up and everything. And then we would go in for a scan and meet with the doctor. And the only positive thing I could say about that is the scan and the doctor's appointment was the same day. So we didn't have to wait. The waiting is the worst part. And this was between UAB and Vanderbilt. So we were back and forth between UAB and Vanderbilt during this time. But every time we would go to that doctor's office, it was just another punch. And it was like, well, it didn't work. The cancer spread. There are more tumors. There are more organs involved. It was like a wildfire had been set off in his body and there was nothing that they could do to contain it or control it. I mean, nothing slowed it down. It was just going at warp speed. Brad had the best attitude through it all. He would always thank Dr. Connery for doing everything that he could. You know, whatever the chemo, I mean, they tried everything, whatever it was. He would thank him for trying everything and not giving up. He would cut up with the nurses, and we came to know and love them, and they loved him and would have his snacks for him that he wanted when he would go and all this stuff. He always had a smile. He didn't complain very often. He was a trooper through it all. And the whole time I am praying, just please save him. Please heal him. Just, keep him with us. And I was worried and stressed, and fear was taking over. Despite my prayers, it was just like I was still terrified and like literally like sick. And so one day at my office, I was sitting in there. I had had a headache for like 4 days and it was awful. And I just was like, God, I cannot do this. Cannot do this. You're just going to have to take this from me. And whatever happens, just take it away. And it was like, for the first time in my whole life, I had surrendered everything to God. Every worry, every fear, every burden and weight of the whole world, I just gave to him that day. And he exchanged that for the peace. That peace, like Philippians 4 peace that you don't understand, because it didn't mean that I was accepting what was going on. It didn't mean that I was okay with it. But it just meant that despite all of that, we were able to see God in so many ways, so many blessings that were poured out on us through that. So much joy despite all the pain and despite what we were going through. And despite knowing and literally watching like my life, the life as we knew it was crumbling and my heart was shattering. But we were able to see God in it all. And God gave us what we needed every day. Like like I said, we were in reaction mode. So you didn't have time it was like we were going day by day, sometimes hour by hour. But God gave us like our manna for the day, whether it was meals, cards, texts, you name it, we were getting it. We were covered in prayer and covered with God's hands and feet. And that was what we needed. I learned to pray big, bold prayers during that time, which I had never done before. Probably beforehand, it was more selfish prayers. And I learned to just be still, which, y'all, that's hard if you've never tried it, to just be still and sit in God's presence. Not praying, not thinking, just being. And during that time, he revealed so many things that he would just lay on my heart. And it's almost surreal. And I would sit like that forever. I mean, it just gave me even more peace than I ever could imagine. One day, after another terrible doctor's appointment, because they all were terrible, let's face it, but there was one day I went home and I just like flopped on the bed. I was done. Had no, I wasn't praying. I wasn't thinking. I wasn't sad. I was like literally empty of everything. I just laid there and I don't know how long I laid there. All I was doing was breathing. And as clear as I'm talking to y'all right now, I hear these words and it said, Brad will be healed. Lives will be saved. And I was like looking around. I mean, it was God. That was God. And that was the hope that I needed and the hope that I just clung to every day after that. And every day since then, Brad will be healed, lives will be saved. I did not know how or when because on paper it did not look good. But that was what I needed, and it was like a blind faith moment just moving forward from there. I called his mom sometime day or two later and I told her, I said, "Hey, this is what God has laid on me." And she was like, "Laurie, same thing. I've had that same thing told to me." And so we just knew. I mean, that's just how we went for the next few months. April 18th, 4 months later, that was his last doctor visit. His body could not handle anything else. He asked his doctor, he said, how long? And he said, 6 weeks. Can't keep a good man down. That's what he said. And he said it because Brad never stopped doing. He worked the whole time. He went out with friends. He played golf. He went to church every week. He went to the kids' activities, sports stuff, school stuff. He didn't miss much. There were some days, but he was living with this. They sent us home with hospice to set us up with hospice. Another thing that 30-something-year-olds should not ever have to do. We had to talk to our kids and try to make their little brains understand as 8 and a 5-year-old and comprehend what was going on when we couldn't comprehend it ourselves. But God gave us the words, thankfully. There were just so many decisions coming at us, like really, really fast. It was all these things, where are you going to go to a hospital? Are you going to do this? End of life instructions, passwords, legal documents, like all these things that we were having to do that it was just so overwhelming. And it was in such a fast time. And 4 days later, on April 22nd, that was, I mean, we're talking 4 days, not 6 weeks, 4 days. He was in so much pain. And the nurse came by and he said, I think I need to go to the hospital. And I'm like, oh, great. So, I mean, we knew, I walked out with her and I said, hey, if he's saying this, you have to do this now. Like he needed to go yesterday if he's saying that he needed to be at the hospital now. So advocacy was another little thing that God gave me during that time. And so we just knew like that was what was going to happen. And that day, all day, everything that we did, it was just like I couldn't breathe. There was just so many decisions that were being made and just coming at us so fast. And I would not want him to see me upset. So I would go to like our room and I was just praying one prayer over and over that day. Like over and over and over. All I prayed for was a miracle or mercy. Nothing more and nothing less. And it wasn't even a prayer. It was like a demand. Like it was the boldest, biggest prayer I have ever prayed in my life. And that's all I said. Miracle or mercy, just over and over and over again. And in God's perfect timing, the snapshot of that rest of that day will forever be etched in my brain. First, one of his best friends was driving in from St. Louis to see him. And it was like I knew something, I just knew something was going on. And I kept calling him over and over. And I was like, you need to get here faster. You need to speed up. So our oldest friends showed up at our house. And we were all able to have, these are our best friends. We were able to have that moment and that time And Brad and Fuller were able to have whatever they had conversation. I don't know what they said, but I know they both needed it. So we got that. Brad's mom called me that night. She said, "Hey, can I come spend the night tonight? I know that you're exhausted." And I hadn't slept in like, I don't know how many days. I was like, yes, you can come over, please. She'd never done that before, by the way. She calls to come over and was going to come spend the night. And I know she knew I was exhausted, but I know she needed that time with him. And that was her baby. He got the kids to bed that night. Not a normal nighttime routine, but he was able to tell them goodnight and do their thing. We were sitting in the den watching TV late that night, and I hear something on my front porch. And I get up to go find out what's going on, and it was some of my besties, my Seekers girls, leaving a tote of stuff on the front porch. And they didn't want to get caught. They were trying to be sneaky, but God knew. He knew I needed to see them. And he knew that I needed to be out there at that moment, because at that same time, and y'all, it was late, this car comes driving by down the street. And it was my brother and sister-in-law. Now, side note, she was great with child at this moment in time. This is her right there in the chair. And I was like, oh my gosh, I told y'all, I said, they're going to the hospital to have the baby. And so I told them goodbye, and I ran inside and told Brad, I said, hey, Austin and Emily are going to have Bo. And he was just like, he just smiled and nodded and said, that's good. That's good. So we got to know that was happening. So we sat there until I could not hold my eyes open any longer. And I was like, I got to go to bed. And the last thing he said was, I love you. Good night. And I went to sleep. And Brad's mom came and woke me up about 3:00 in the morning. And she said, Laurie, I think he's gone. And I was just like, what? Like, really? And it was like, I mean, God took all of that and made it so perfect. Our prayer for miracle and mercy was all tied up in one. And he knew that she needed to be there that night, that we needed that moment together. And I'm forever cherish that. So we were starting making our phone calls. I'm calling my parents to tell them what's going on. I called Dad and Susan, and I said, hey, I told them what had happened, and they didn't say anything. And I was like, what? I remember saying, what? And they said, Bo was just born. And it was like Bo was born like the same time Brad died. Like their souls must have like high-fived it. Like, I mean, you can't deny that timing. It was the mercy that God showed Brad, and it was a miracle that he gave our family all at the same time. And April 23rd will forever be a day that reminds me that God hears every single prayer, and he works them out in ways that we will never, ever understand. One life ended and another began. And it was joy in the midst of utter sadness. And it is every year, like every year. So next few weeks go by, and we are like in this blur of life. We're trying to be normal when nothing's normal. God was carrying me. I mean, we were just in survival mode. And another one of my Sunday school girls made a Facebook post about like doing your monthly breast exam, your self breast exam. And I mean, I'd never done that. I was like, well, I probably should start doing this, So I did. And it was like, that's weird. And it was just something felt strange. Wasn't like a BB or this little knot like I would imagine, breast cancer would feel like, but it was like a piece of chewed up gum. And I was going, whatever. There is no way. There's no way. Everything we've been through, I'm being a hypochondriac. This cannot be happening. So I blew it off for a few days. And I'm standing in my bathroom one morning and my ears start ringing, like out of the blue, loud ringing. Would never and still won't say that this is a cancer sign. But Brad complained of his ears ringing months before he found out what was going on. Like, we would talk about it all the time because he was just like, they won't stop. They're just ringing. So that day when my ears started ringing, I was like, oh, great. I'll probably have cancer too. But that's what prompted me to call the doctor. So I called my doctor And they were like, "Well, you were just here a few months ago, but I'm sure it's nothing. You were just here." And I said, It probably wasn't. You're probably right." But then I like lost it on the phone with them. So they got me right in. I mean, they were like, "Oh gosh." I told them everything that had happened. And they were like, "Okay, come in tomorrow." So I did not tell anybody. I told no one in my family what was going on. And didn't want to stress anybody out, feared it was nothing. So Jake and I head off to St. Vincent's East to go see my gynecologist. And she was like, "Yeah, I do feel that. Why don't you go downstairs for a mammogram?" Never had a mammogram before. Okay. So I go downstairs and I have the mammogram and they read it on site and they called me into the office at the radiologist's office and he was like, "Hey, this is what we're seeing. And if you were my wife, I'd probably want you to go get this checked out." Okay, great. So long story short, within like an hour, I'm sitting in a surgeon's office at the hospital, same surgeon's office that I sat in 9 months before with Brad, getting ready to have a breast biopsy done. The nurses had taken Jake somewhere. I don't know where he was, but thank goodness he wasn't in there with me. But I was just like, "You've got to be kidding me." I mean, like, how can this be going on? And also, great, I'm going to have to tell my parents about this. I mean, this was a little bit more than I'd anticipated when I left out that morning. So they were sworn to secrecy, but they couldn't tell anybody. And the only other people that knew were y'all. We went for a sanity dinner. These are my Seekers girls again. And they would take me to dinner to just like keep me sane. And their husbands could never say no because it was like, "Oh, we have to take Laurie to dinner. Keep the kids." Like we were on a dinner again. We might have had more dinners then than we ever have. I mean, they could never say no. And I remember telling y'all, and I remember your faces were like, "Oh my gosh, what's she telling us now?" And I was like, "I'm sure it's nothing, but extra prayers won't hurt." So, a few days later, I go back to the doctor's office to get those results. Again, by myself, because I did not want to make this a big deal because it was not going to be cancer. So I'm sitting in there and he said, "They say God doesn't give you more than you can handle, right?" And I'm like, "Well, that's terrible theology. And yes, that's like totally not right. Like, I've just lived way more than I could ever handle, and God didn't give it to us. I mean, it was this world that gave it to us, but God got us through it. But I so wanted to get out of there. I was like, like, let's go. Like, I'm done." And he said, "It's cancer." And I was just like, "What?" I said, "Are you serious?" And he was like, "Yeah." And all I could think about was Katie and Jake. What is going to happen to them if they lose both of their parents in this short amount of time? And I just laid my head on this guy's shoulder and just start bawling. Like I don't even know what he was doing. He's probably thinking, "Oh great, like how am I gonna get this woman out of here?" But the next thing I know, my dad shows up. He is in the room holding me. And he's got like if y'all know my dad, he has an uncanny sense of showing up like kind of stalkerish, but not creepy stalker. And he just happened to be at the hospital that day and just happened to be close to this surgeon's office. And by the way, he was in the waiting room while I was in there, which he needed to be. And I'm so glad he was. And we end up in the parking lot and my mom showed up. She was there too. Don't remember how this happened, but I just remember standing there with them in the parking lot and just screaming. Like there weren't words. It was just noise, but God knew. Like, it was so not fair. It was not fair. Not fair for me, not fair for the kids, not fair for our family, because we had all just gone through so much. And this is 10 weeks after Brad had died that I'm standing there with this news. And it was just, it was just another time to just give it all to God again. I mean, I was gonna have to put my mourning aside. I remember just being mad. Like, I'm gonna have to I can't even mourn and go through this grief process because now I'm gonna have to start fighting for myself. But God took over like he always does, and he lavished love upon us again. I mean, through friends and food and meals and taking care of the kids and literally praying over us. This community, our church, the whole village, our family, it was just every person that God put in our lives at that time just helped him carry us. Um, he put together a great team of doctors and nurses for me that not they understood the gravity of what was going on. So they ran every test possible on me, and we were able to find out that it was caught early. It was very treatable. I had every reason to believe that my cancer was that story was gonna turn out different than Brad's. And I'm forever thankful for those doctors and nurses and that team that took care of me physically, but also emotionally and spiritually. I mean, they all taught, I mean, they would pray, they would do everything. I mean, this was amazing team of doctors and nurses. So, I had a great prognosis. I started chemo in July of 2013, and I finished my 18th round December 19th of that year, which, if you're keeping tabs, 363 days after Brad got diagnosed, I finished my chemo. So that was a year. I had a double mastectomy in January of 2014, and I've been cancer free ever since. And what was so cruel, seemed so cruel at the time, with that diagnosis turned out to be such a blessing from God, because it was another promise fulfilled. He told me that day, his promise to me was Brad will be healed, lives will be saved. And I always thought, oh, people will hear this story and we will be able, people will come to Christ, to know Christ better because of what Brad went through. But y'all, like, my life was saved because of what Brad went through. I don't know. I was young. I was 34 years old. Like, hadn't had a mammogram before. I was too young for all that. And I know that because Brad went through what he did, or if he hadn't have, we wouldn't have found that cancer until much, much later. So my life was saved. God showed me during that time that I had his strength still inside of me, like that strength that I did not know that I had. It allowed me to have conversation with the kids then and even now. Like, something really bad happened to us, but look at all the good things God has done since then. And we would talk about just different blessings that we had seen and we had gone through, and that, yes, bad things have happened, but so much good has come out of it. And it showed me, it just reminded me to be grateful for every day I was given, and to just trust God with the rest. So, my favorite part. This is the happy part. Katie had decided to cheer in 3rd grade. So, I was still going through chemo at the time, and I would drop her off at practice, and then Jake and I would take off to, like, the track or whatever to go walk or play or whatever while she was at practice. And I would see this guy there or I saw a guy one time or whatever playing with this little boy. And I knew that I recognized him. He was Brooker, my old friend from high school. His daughter had signed up to cheer for the first time that year too. So he would drop her off, and then he and his son would be playing, like, in the rocks or whatever when Jake and I would go by. He had his own set of life events happen to him. I knew a little bit of what had happened. He was a single dad. Now I've only seen him like once or twice since high school. So, we were like, "Hey, hey, Brooker, how's it going?" Whatever. Walked on. Did not think anything else about it. Just remembered, like, he was always such a nice guy, and he seems to be such a great dad. He's like playing in the rocks with this little boy, and they're just always playing. So cheer ends, and I do not see him again for a year. Nowhere. We've now known that we live like 2 blocks from each other, but we never saw each other. So the girls decided to cheer again the next year, and that year I was asked to coach. So, I was always there. There's one of my girls right there. I was always at practice, and I had Jake with me. So he was usually, playing in the grass or whatever, but Shane would always be there with his son Jonah. And so I would look over sometimes and Jake's playing with this little boy, and I was like, "Oh, thank goodness I know that guy, so he won't like steal my kid or anything." Like it's just like this, like, oh, I can just trust him. So that's kind of how it went. I was not looking for a relationship whatsoever. But, like, I would also have these chats with God. Like, I just talked to God kinda like this, except for there's nobody looking at me. I'm just, like, talking to myself. And one day I was in my bathroom. It seems as that's where it always happens. And I was like, God, I'm not ready to date anybody, but, like, I don't wanna be a spinster forever." Jill asked me the other day what a spinster is. I was like, "I don't know." I mean, I've never really ever said that word either, but I looked it up. And by the way, it's just an old single person, an old single lady. That's a spinster. So that day, I said it. But I was like, but I mean, if you were going to bring somebody into my life, they would like have to love you with like all their heart. And they would have to know that I was happily married and be okay with, be confident enough in themselves to know that I was married before. They would have to love my kids. They would have to be okay with my scars, like literally. They would have to be close to my age. I mean, I started rattling all this stuff off. Close to my age, and then they're gonna just have baggage because we're, like, 30 something, and how will I ever, like, be able to trust them and know them, like, on a level that I, like, knew Brad, because we had been together for so long. But God heard all of that, and he started writing a new story, and I started running into Shane Brooker everywhere I went. Like, it wasn't just cheer. He was always at cheer practice, dropping off his daughter, but it wasn't just there. So he finally got the nerve to ask me out in November. So we decided to go to lunch because that was safe. So he picked me up, and we start talking, and it went on and on for hours, which is funny because if you know Shane, he does not talk for hours, but that day he did. And, like, we were there for so long, I had to call my mom to get her to go get the kids off the bus. Like, I'm on a first date. That was embarrassing in and of itself. Needless to say, we hit it off. And one date turned into another, and y'all, we had some hard conversations, like, right off the bat. But with the life experiences that Shane and I had gone through and having kids in the mix, we just needed to know where this was headed. So we just laid it all out on the table and just let God take it, gave it all to him. Like I said, it was loud and clear for both of us. Shane had been content being single. He wasn't looking for a relationship. He was getting all the same signs from God. And it was like he was taking two broken hearts and joining us together for a new story. And it happened fast, like really fast. Like our parents were probably pretty nervous fast. I mean, I don't know about Shane, but after Brad died and I was sick, I mean, my mom moved in for a few weeks after I had my surgery. And I mean, she was, y'all were giving me my medicine and bathing me and doing like all these things. Like I literally, it went back into parent child, even though I had my own kids. It was that time. So I know that y'all were quite nervous because it's just like getting protective of your kids again. Not that that ever goes away, I don't guess. But Shane and I knew. I mean, it was God's will. We knew it. So we were like, "Well, I'll wait." So we got married November 21st of 2015, which is about a year after we had started dating. The girls were two girls about to be 12, and then our boys were 8 and 6 at the time. We're still so in awe of how God worked all that out. I mean, it was something that we would have never, ever imagined. We knew each other in high school. So, I mean, to answer the prayer of like, how am I going to know and trust this guy? I met him when I was 14 and I've known him all this time. And it was just like God planted seeds way back then that we would know and need now. So we're blending our family, which is in and of itself hard. And there are so many prayers and tears and so much grace and forgiveness, just like in any of our marriages. I mean, we're no different. We just know that whatever whatever we go through, we just know that God's going to get us through it because He made it so obvious that we needed to be together. And we've gotten it wrong and we've gotten it right. We've probably gotten it wrong a lot. But I'm so thankful for the family that we've built and for having him and just getting to do life with Shane. I'm thankful every day for it, and I never want to take a day for granted because I know how fast it can go. And we'll just continue to rely on God through the valleys and the peaks with all of that. So, not the way I would have written my story. Never would have written it like this. Young widow, cancer survivor, second wife, stepmom, those were not my titles that I would have ever given in my story. But those titles have given me an unwavering trust in God. And it's given me like a real life lived out experience of how God can just take something that just seems so awful and just work it into something amazing. He's always got a plan and he's always got a purpose. My role is just to trust him to do it. He's used these big life events to show his goodness and to teach me through every one of these titles different things. Inner strength and compassion, as being a widow. And having that title has allowed me to have conversations with people, too many people that I am really good friends with that are in that club. It's not a club that you want to be in, but it has allowed us to know that we are not alone and just to be there for each other when we're going through hell, basically, and just reminding that God has got it. Cancer survivor, he's used that title to give my kids hope. I mean, it ended good for me, right? So they all know that it doesn't always mean that you're going to die if you get cancer, that you can survive this. It healed me physically and emotionally. And that's let me have conversations with so many women that have been diagnosed, that have had a cancer scare, that just want to talk about what they've gone through, or, hey, can we see your reconstruction? Sure. I don't care. It's been some fun conversations. Shane sometimes is like, what did you do? And I'm like, well, medical devices. Um, and it has allowed us to pay it forward and to just shine God's, like that same light that God shone on us all that time to other people with the creation of the Brad Eccles Family Foundation. And that's a group that formed just out of some guys that were wanting to get together to remember their friend. And it turned into a group that we provide financial assistance for people and families who are fighting their own cancer battles. And we just remind them that, hey, you are not alone in this. We are here for you. Other people are here for you. And you're not alone in this. And God is right there with you. We pray for them and just walk with them through it. Second wife and mom reminds me literally of Jeremiah 29:11. I'm living it out. Like he took something that was so messed up and he has brought such a new and wonderful story from it. And it just reminds me to trust God's plans, God's timing. I talked earlier about planting seeds, like those same seeds that were planted by having my own bonus family. I never knew that one day I would be in that role. And so I've had a great example, just this whole blending and how that works and doesn't work. It's let me see that grief and happiness can coexist and joy covers all of it. And life can be so beautiful on this side of heaven, even though I did not expect it to be. It's not been the way that I thought it was going to be. So those are the truths that I hold on. That's what I go back to. I go back to those promises that God gave me really all my life, but that it's like been supernaturally known, for the past 12 years, like heightened. And I pray I never stop trusting him for the plans he has for my life and my family's life, my kids' lives. Just trust him and know that even though it is not like I think it might be, that he is going to take it and he's going to work it out. And I pray that anybody else that hears that will remember that too. So I'll leave you with this. This is some verses that I like that have just become near and dear to me over the past several years, and I've just kind of hung on to those. Psalms 27:13 and 14. And it says, I am still confident of this. I will see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. Wait for the Lord. Be strong and take heart and wait for the Lord.
As we mentioned at the beginning of this story, there were so many layers to her story. I mean, when she said, so if you're doing the math, it's 363 days
Oh.
that Brad got, was diagnosed, and then she finished her last treatment, chemo.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just, to me, that was amazing. We talked about titling the story differently because we loved when she was talking about the miracles and the mercy, God's miracles and mercy. And one of the things that I had written down was like, God granted her both. All of those examples of mercy. The night that Brad passed away really hit home to me because she was praying for that, and he was able to bathe his kids that night.
Right.
His mother came over.
There were so many things.
His mother was there. Her friends showed up that night. I mean, the baby being born at the same time he passed. I mean, all of those layers of mercy were just so sweet to me, and just for her to hold on to as she then entered her season of battling cancer as well. And then even just being a widow and praying for a husband, she knew the Lord was hearing her prayers. So she could always rest back on that.
And this story, when I was listening to it, it reminds me of what my mother always said. You never know what a day will bring. You never know what a day will bring. And because of that, we have to almost fan the flame of our faith in the off season. You're not going through something, so that you're prepared when out of the blue your husband has pain, and then 12 hours later he's got a mass. And so cultivate your faith so that you're prepared, because you're going to need it in those times. Because that's what gave her peace, was her faith.
And I was really challenged by her talking about sitting with the Lord in silence. And she did that in her season of grief and absolute weakness and desperation. But I think where I was challenged is what you just said, Lindy, is that what if we're doing that now? We're building our faith at this point when life hasn't hit the fan, when everything is not crazy. I just was really challenged of, how often am I sitting before the Lord listening? And just not talking, not just praying, listening. Just listening. And I used to do that more than I do now. And I was challenged by
because it's a difficult exercise to do. I mean, we know that of sitting and being still, but that was one of the notes that I did put down, because she talked about during the season of Brad going through his chemo treatment, her being still was the only thing that gave her peace.
That's right.
Which I just found that so interesting, and I loved also, she referenced, that God gave her enough manna for the day.
Yes.
Because how often do we try to run ahead of God in those situations? And she even said he gave her enough, because she was like, I'm not like an advocate. She gave her enough advocacy, in the healthcare system for her husband each day. It wasn't like she had to plan out, okay, well, I've got to do this, and I've got to do this. It was like, okay, God's going to give me what I need to advocate for today.
That's right. And her faith kept growing because she immediately started asking for big, bold things.
Yes.
Isn't it amazing that it takes a crisis for us to ask big things of God?
And then that big, bold ask went to her asking for a husband.
That's right.
Yeah. And just like how he did immeasurably more in shame.
And, listening to her story, I know several women walking through similar situations right now whose husbands are sick. And I thought, I want to send them this story immediately.
Right.
And so if that's you today and you're listening, and if this was for you, please let us know. Or if there's a friend that needs to hear this and needs this kind of encouragement and faith building and whatever else that Laurie talks about, please share this story, because I immediately was like, this person. Life's not easy.
No, it's not.
Well, as you know, if you've been listening in season 9, we are ending with a challenge and a prayer every week. And so our challenge, Laurie talks about in her story, community surrounding her. And that's so many of all of our stories. We love that. It's the heart behind StoryTellers.
That's right.
It's one of our things, is building community. But our challenge for you today is, who is in your path this week that needs encouragement? Who is hurting? And how can you be the hands and feet of Jesus to someone this week? And that is simple, because there are hurting people all around us.
That's right.
And it helps get our eyes off of ourselves.
That's right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Laurie, thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being transparent and helping us build our faith through what the Lord has done in your life. And I'm going to close this in prayer today. So will you vow with me? Father God, thank you that you are sovereign, that you go before us, and that you are in the details of our life at every moment, even when we can't understand, even when things come out of the blue. Father, you are there and your will is perfect. And thank you for the peace that only comes through the Holy Spirit in us that you give us. And Father, I just ask that you would take the focus off ourselves and help us to reach out into our communities this week and be the hands and feet of Jesus. In Jesus' name, amen.